My name is Nora, and for most of my life I believed that silence was harmless. I believed that if something wasn't spoken out loud, it couldn't grow teeth and bite you later. I was wrong. I inherited my grandmother's house when I was 38. It stood at the edge of a small coastal town, where the cliffs dropped sharply into gray water and the wind never really stopped blowing. The house had been in our family for 3 generations. People in town called it the lightkeeper's place, even though it was never officially a lighthouse. It simply stood tall enough on the hill to look like one. When my grandmother died, no one else wanted the house. Too isolated. Too old. Too many repairs. I took it without thinking too hard. I told myself I wanted peace. A slower life. Fewer expectations. What I didn't admit was that I wanted distance, from the city, from my failed engagement, from the version of myself that had fallen apart too easily. The first weeks in the house felt almost romantic. I painted the shutters, scrubbed the wooden floors, opened windows that hadn't been touched in years. The air smelled like salt and dust. At night, I could hear the ocean crashing below the cliffs. It was loud enough to feel alive, but far enough away to feel safe. The attic was the last place I cleaned. It was cramped and heavy with old trunks, photo albums, boxes tied with string. Most of it was ordinary: letters, clothes, faded photographs of people long gone. But in the far corner, beneath a loose floorboard, I found something that didn't belong. A metal box. Inside it were newspaper clippings. Dozens of them. All about one thing: a disappearance. A woman named Elise Rowan had vanished from this town 42 years ago. No body was found. No suspect was charged. The case had slowly faded from public interest. I had never heard of her. But what unsettled me was the date. She disappeared the same year my grandmother bought this house. At first, I tried to convince myself it meant nothing. Small towns have histories. People leave. People run away. But as I read more, patterns began to form. Elise had been 32. She worked at the local post office. She was described as quiet and reserved. The last person to see her alive was a neighbor who claimed she was walking toward the cliffs at sunset. The article mentioned one more detail: she had recently been asking questions about the house on the hill. My house. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified: the wind scraping against the siding, the old beams shifting. I kept thinking about the metal box hidden under the floorboard. Why would my grandmother keep those clippings? Why hide them? The next morning, I went to the town library. The librarian, an older man named Gerald, recognized my last name immediately. "You're Marlene's granddaughter," he said. "Haven't seen that family up here in years." I asked him about Elise Rowan. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "That was a long time ago," he said carefully. "People stop asking about that." "But she disappeared," I pressed. "So do a lot of people." It wasn't an answer. Over the next few days, I walked the town. I visited the small grocery store, the post office, the cafe near the harbor. When I mentioned Elise's name casually, conversation shortened. Smiles faded. It was as if I had said something impolite. On the 4th night, I heard something. A knock. Not at the door. Under the floor. It was faint at first, like wood settling. But then it came again. 3 deliberate taps. I froze in the hallway, my breath caught halfway in my chest. The house was old. Old houses make noise. That's what I told myself. But the rhythm was wrong. Too steady. Tap. 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 It came from the direction of the attic. I forced myself to climb the narrow stairs, flashlight shaking in my hand. The attic looked the same. Dust floating in the beam of light. Boxes unmoved. Silence thick as wool. Then I saw it. The loose floorboard. It wasn't fully closed. I knew I had pushed it back into place after finding the box. I knelt slowly and lifted it. The metal box was gone. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I searched the attic frantically, pulling aside trunks, opening empty crates. Nothing. The box had been there. I wasn't imagining it. My hands began to shake as the reality settled in. Someone else knew. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on the back porch. Large. Not mine. Not recent enough to be fresh, but not old either. The wind should have erased them. I called the sheriff's office. A deputy came, glanced around, and told me it was probably teenagers. They like to scare newcomers, he said with a shrug. But there was something in his eyes. Something restrained. That afternoon, Gerald from the library showed up at my door unannounced. "You've been asking questions," he said quietly. "Yes." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. His face looked older up close. Tired. "Your grandmother was not who you think she was," he said. The words hit harder than I expected. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. Then, Elise didn't disappear. The room felt smaller. She found something. Something about the land this house sits on. Back then, there were rumors of illegal shipments moving through these cliffs. Smuggling. Your grandmother's husband, your grandfather, was involved. I stared at him. Elise came too close to proving it. She threatened to go to the police. And? Gerald looked toward the window, as if someone might be listening. She never left town. My stomach turned cold. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," he interrupted softly, "that some secrets are buried where the sea can't reach them. The cliffs." That night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed a shovel from the shed and walked toward the narrow path that led down the rocky slope behind the house. The moon was bright enough to guide me. The wind howled against my ears. Halfway down, near a patch of uneven ground that looked subtly disturbed, I stopped. I don't know how long I stood there before I started digging. The soil was harder than I expected. My hands blistered quickly. But after an hour, the shovel struck something solid. Not a rock. Wood. I fell to my knees and scraped away the dirt with trembling hands. It was an old crate. Rotted at the edges. Inside it were bones. Small fragments at first. Then unmistakable shapes. I don't remember dropping the shovel. I don't remember backing away. I only remember the sound of the ocean crashing below, louder than it had ever been before. Elise Rowan had never left town. She had been buried within sight of the house she had questioned. And my grandmother had known. The police came. There were investigations. Headlines returned after 42 years of silence. My grandfather had died decades ago. My grandmother had taken the truth with her to the grave. But I was the one standing there when it surfaced. In the weeks that followed, the town changed. People talked more openly. Gerald admitted he had always suspected but never had proof. Others confessed they had heard rumors but chose not to believe them. Silence had protected the wrong people for too long. I sold the house 3 months later. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something important. Some walls hold memories. Others hold guilt. And I was not going to spend my life living inside someone else's buried secret. Now, when I hear the ocean, I don't think of fear. I think of truth. Because no matter how deep something is hidden, it eventually rises. Just like bones beneath the earth,